Welcome into the Broncos Breakdown by Chat Sports. Matthew Peterson here with some blockbuster trade ideas. Now, before we proceed any further, if you're the dude that's going to go down in the comment section and say this is never happening, you're no fun at parties. It is the middle of the offseason. Let's just have some fun and swing for the fences. They all might be pop flies and can of corns into shallow left field, but who knows? It's the NFL. Denver has pulled off already a couple blockbuster trades recently. You can never quite rule out the Patons for making another big move. Now, if Denver is going to make a move for one of the players we'll talk about today, these are the picks at their disposal. They've got a first and a third. They had 2 thirds. They traded one of them to move up to get Riley Moss. They have a pair of fourths. They got the second one from Miami after trading Bradley Chubb, a fifth, and a pair of sevens. So they have some picks to work with. Like that first-round pick can get a lot of the players we'll talk about today. I don't think they should move on from that first-round pick. That's a long time without having one. But if they are, gung-ho on getting one of the players we're going to look at today, they do have the means to get a trade done. So the first trade target on today's show is Trey Lance. And here we go. This is surely going to get the room on its feet. So the reason why we're talking about Trey Lance is because an NBC Sports reporter from the Bay Area who covers the 49ers put out a tweet with a link to an article that said the recent vibe coming out of 49ers headquarters suggests a belief Brock Purdy is the favorite to be the team's starting quarterback when the season opens September 10th at the Steelers. Now, he also had a link to that tweet right there to an article. That article got deleted. So I don't know if John Lynch and Shanahan came crashing down on this reporter and said, take this story off the interweb, but it was out there because the internet never dies. So if the 49ers are going to go with Brock Purdy, which I don't think should be a big surprise to anyone, do they really want to hold on to Trey Lance for a third season as being the backup quarterback? Maybe not. Maybe they decide we found our Tom Brady, we found our day 3 gem in Brock Purdy. We're going to proceed with him, and let's just move on from Lance so we can sort of end all the questions surrounding who's the quarterback. Is it going to be Trey Lance or is it going to be Brock Purdy? Now, Lance does not have a ton of film out there on him. He's only played in 8 NFL games so far. He started 4. And remember, his last season in college, it was wiped away from COVID. Season before that, he only played in 1 game. The guy has hardly played any football the last 4 to 5 seasons, and he's still only 22 years old. So if the price isn't very high for Trey Lance, which I think it's probably going to be a bit higher than what I would like to see, but let's just say it's not a very ridiculously high asking price, you got to at least consider it, right? After the way Russell Wilson played last season, Denver should not leave any stone unturned when it comes to future quarterback options. It's also a potential win-win for Denver and San Francisco, right? Starting with the Broncos, they can get a potential head start on replacing Russell Wilson. If he is cheeks again in 2023, they can trade for Trey Lance and do a Jordan Love cycle where he's a backup for maybe a bit longer than envisioned to start his career, but he's still very young and he can learn from Russell Wilson and maybe take over in 2024. Sean Payton also gets a young quarterback to groom, right? He's a quarterback whisperer. He's done great things with Drew Brees and a lot of other quarterbacks throughout his career. I'm sure he'd love to work with a raw project like Trey Lance, who has so many great skills. And then, like I said, great skills. He's a high ceiling type player. Trey Lance can make a lot of great throws. This is not a Trey Lance is going to be a great quarterback portion of the show. This is we can at least understand with his potential, it's worth inquiring. Why does San Francisco want to do this? They kind of get to move on from all the drama surrounding, is it Lance or Purdy, and they can commit to Brock full time. And in the process, they get some draft assets back. So if you were the GM, if you were either Peyton, would you trade for Trey Lance? Before we talk about what it costs to get him, because that's a fair point to make. Just off the cuff. Are you interested in getting Trey Lance? Yes or no? Let me know down in the comment section. There's not a whole lot out on Trey Lance. He only has 4 starts in his career. I mean, he started 1.5 games in 2022. The first one was in Chicago. It was an absolute monsoon. He couldn't throw the ball more than 20 yards. No one could that day. But there has been a lot of good in Trey Lance. He's got the athleticism. He can run well. He's got the crazy strong arm that allows him to make a lot of throws, which So does Zach Wilson, and we know how well that works. So it's not just about having a strong arm. But I guess the big point I want to make here is if the asking price is reasonable, right? If the asking price for Trey Lance was just a 7th rounder, all teams would do that, right? It's worth throwing a 7th rounder at a player like Trey Lance to see if he can live up to be that top 3 quarterback he was picked. So if it's not going to be a 7th rounder, which it's not, at what point is it acceptable for you, right? Where you can stomach it. For me, if it's a 3rd rounder, I don't think Trey Lance has been all that great so far, but I can at least accept the fact that a 3rd rounder is probably worth the flyer on Trey Lance to see if Sean Payton can make him this team's quarterback for the next decade plus, right? I wouldn't do it for a 1st. Even if Denver had a 2nd, I probably wouldn't do it for a 2nd. 3rd is right around my boundary. If it's a 4th, I'm in. I don't think it costs a 4th. I think San Francisco would probably want a bit more. But then again, they might not get a lot more because who's calling for a guy that's played such little football in the last 3 to 4 seasons? Moving on to our second trade target. This is Budda Baker. We talked about him a couple of times on the show already, but I figured we'd include him one more time because this appears to be a name that a lot of fans are interested in. So Bleacher Report identified Denver as a trade destination for Budda Baker a couple of days ago. So there's some buzz on the streets about Budda Baker reuniting with Vance Joseph, who he played under for quite some time after he was canned at Mile High. Now, the report from Adam Schefter earlier this offseason was that Budda Baker wants to become the highest paid safety or get traded. I don't see Arizona shelling out big bucks for a safety like him, because just safety is not a super valued position. We're in the midst of a reset down in the desert. So maybe they do try to get some picks for a new GM and start rebuilding around Kyler, or maybe it's Caleb Williams. Who knows? Now, Denver's safety room, it has a great safety room, I think. Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson are 2 very, very good starting safety tandems. Caden Stearns, I think, could also start for a majority of the NFL. You have J.L. Skinner, who I like a lot coming out of Boise State. And if P.J. Locke and De'Aaron Turner-Yell are the worst safeties on your team, that's not a very bad safety room. But Budda Baker is special. We know this. Multiple-time Pro Bowler, 2-time All-Pro safety, 27 pass breakups, 7 interceptions under Vance Joseph. He has been very good with Vance Joseph as his defensive coordinator. So here's my stance on Budda Baker. Given the high draft capital it would probably take to get Budda Baker and then make him a top-paid safety, I'm passing. I just don't think Denver is a top 5 highest-paid safety away from making a lot of noise, right? I think they've got to start by holding on to some assets, unless it's, a position, a game-changing player at a position like a quarterback, which is my backdoor way of saying I'm interested in holding out on Trey Lance if it doesn't cost too much. But for Budda Baker, they've got Justin Simmons. They've got other good safeties. Hold on to your picks. Don't give them all this money. They have Surtain and Simmons. That hasn't beaten the Chiefs yet. Why is Budda Baker going to be the difference maker? I don't see it. Now, before we get on to the rest of our trade candidates, if we got any new people watching right now who have not subscribed to the channel, go down right now, hit that sub button, type me in the chat, and I'll give shout-outs to those of you who are new to the channel and type me down below. If you're already subscribed, you've gotten your fair share of shout-outs. New subscribers only, trying to give back to Broncos country. So hit that sub button for absolutely nothing and type me down below for a shout-out. Let's power our way through these next 3 trade targets here, starting with Chase Young. So Chase Young has been rumored to be on the market. Washington did not pick up his 5th-year option, which was definitely a head-scratcher. A former 2nd overall pick has unfortunately been limited to just 12 games over the last 2 seasons. He was the NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year back in 2020, but an ACL injury in 2021, which basically took him, 18 months to recover, made him miss most of 2022. And now Chase Young has kind of fallen out of favor in the nation's capital, right? When you look at his stats over the last 3 seasons, only 1.5 sacks the last 2 seasons. Like, that's not very good. But he was awesome his rookie season, right? For a rookie to have 7.5 sacks, think about that. Just as a rookie, you're already halfway to double-digit sacks. Like, there's a lot of reason to believe once he's healthy, he could be a double-digit sack guy for years to come. And I think for Washington, they kind of want to just move on a little bit because there might be some, I don't say bad blood, but some frustration with Chase Young and his rehab in 2021 and 2022. Now, Denver's front five has some good pieces, but there's no piece that I can say confidently will be on this team in 2 to 3 seasons, right? Baron Browning is up and coming. Randy Gregory has a make-or-break season. Zach Allen just signed a 3-year contract, but teams can always get out of that after a season or two. So you don't really have a future at the edge rusher position. Chase Young could be that for you. So if you can get Chase Young for less than a first-rounder, I think it's worth a chance. Like, I think we're kind of forgetting how special of a player he was coming out of Ohio State, and we've let time sort of warped our brains to forget about Chase Young. But Chase Young looked so good his rookie season. A new setting for Chase Young, a new home and whatnot might be what he needs coming off this injury, and Denver could get the 2nd overall pick and their next Von Miller, if you will, for years to come for a 2nd rounder, a 3rd rounder. Yeah, I think I'd be very interested in that. Before we get on to our 4th and final trade targets, we've got an awesome deal going on thanks to Fanatics. You don't just get 1 shirt on sale. You get 2 shirts on sale when you go to chatsports.com/Broncos combo. Summer is here. It's warming up. So make sure you are repping your Sunday squad by also getting a good deal when you go to chatsports.com/Broncos combo. That link's in the comments and the description of today's video. As for our 4th trade target, let's keep it on the defensive side. What about Grover Stewart, defensive tackle from the Colts? So Stewart has been mentioned in a lot of trade rumors throughout the offseason so far. He has been an extremely reliable player for Indy. He's only missed 2 games in his 6-year career. Originally a rotating player on the defensive line, he has become a staple on the Colts defensive line. He's sort of been overshadowed by DeForest Buckner and Yannick Ngakoue, but he has been one of the best in terms of interior defensive linemen, ranking 35th out of 127 qualifying defensive linemen according to PFF. Here are his stats over the last 4 seasons when he's been a staple of the Colts defense. He doesn't offer a ton of pass rush upside. He's coming off 4 sacks, which for a defensive tackle that's primary job is run stopping, 4 sacks is pretty good if you ask me. So he does offer you some upside on that half of the field, but he is primarily a run stopper, which I'm never opposed to adding more run stoppers. Now, when it comes to the financial side of trading for Grover Stewart, here are the numbers behind it. If you trade him after June 1st, which we are at this point now, his base salary, which a new team would be taking on, is $9.2 million. Usually, the team that trades away the player eats some of that money to facilitate a trade. Cap savings for Indy, 9.6. So you can see why a team like the Colts, who are rebuilding, in my opinion, could be interested in saving $10 million. Very little dead money. It's the last year of his contract. So Grover Stewart could be on the way out. For the right price, I'm interested in adding any above-average players, especially in the trenches, right? Where I think Sean Payton early on is going to want to improve at. They've focused on the offensive line in free agency. They didn't do a ton on the defensive line in the draft. So maybe now they decide to bring on Grover Stewart too. If he plays well, you ink him to an extension, and you've got some good building blocks on this defense for Sean Payton. Our 5th and final trade target now for Denver, Dalvin Cook. I usually say save the best for last. In this case, this is probably my least desirable of the 5 options. He is expected to either be traded or released by the Vikings. And who knows? Maybe by the time you're watching this, he's already been released or traded because we are filming this live on Tuesday during our show. He was drafted partially by George Paton in Minnesota when he was the assistant GM. Now, when you look at Dalvin Cook's salary, this is the big hiccup. No one wants to pay a guy $10.4 million after averaging 4.4 yards a carry, a career low last season for Minnesota. He's still a 1,000-yard rusher, 4 straight seasons, and 8 touchdowns. So for him having a 1,000-yard season as a down season, he still has some juice left in the tank. But Dalvin Cook also led the NFL in rushes that were 1 or fewer yards per carry. With Javonte Williams making good progress on his rehab and being way ahead of my schedule, really anyone's schedule, this one really feels unlikely. Now, if Javonte were to suffer a setback, maybe George Paton goes, hey, we're going to be a run-heavy team. I still have some friends in Minnesota. We can get him for nothing. They'll eat a lot of his salary. They'll send him over here, and we'll get a nice committee going with Dalvin Cook, Samaje Perine until Javonte Williams returns. That is the only path I can carve out for this trade going down. I think it's highly unlikely, but there are some connections, so you can't quite rule it out. So I want to know from everyone watching before we get on out of here, who do you want the Broncos to trade for? One of the 5 guys we talked about on today's show? Is it someone else I forgot about? Let me know who you want to see in Denver this season.